Hi, welcome to the Elle Russ Show, where I deliver content intended to inspire, educate, and motivate. Engage with me online at elleruss.com and on social media. Enjoy the show. Today, my guest is Kristin Neff, and we're going to talk about her book, Fierce Self-Compassion: How Women Can Harness Kindness to Speak Up, Claim Their Power, and Thrive. Kristin received her doctorate from the University of California at Berkeley, and she is currently an associate professor of educational psychology at the University of Texas at Austin. In conjunction with her colleague, Dr. Chris Germer, she developed an empirically supportive training program called Mindful Self-Compassion, which is taught by thousands of teachers worldwide. They also co-authored the Mindful Self-Compassion Workbook, as well as Teaching the Mindful Self-Compassion Program, a guide for professionals. She is also the co-founder of the nonprofit Center for Mindful Self-Compassion. Enjoy the show. Hi, Kristin. How are you? Welcome to the show.
Oh, hi. I'm great. Thanks for having me.
So, you wrote a book called Self-Compassion, but now we're going to talk about fierce self-compassion, how women can harness kindness to speak up, claim their power, and thrive. I guess let's just start off right off the bat. How do you define compassion in general?
So compassion, well, in the field of science, is generally defined as concern with the alleviation of suffering. But in my model of compassion, I have two other elements. One is mindfulness. You have to be willing to be in the presence of suffering, whether it's that homeless person on the street, you have to be willing to notice them, or whether it's yourself, you need to actually be aware that you're struggling in the moment and that you need some kindness. And then the other really important thing is a sense of common humanity, right? This is what differentiates compassion from pity. Like pitying someone else means looking down on them. Self-pity means like, woe is me, as if somehow my problems are the most important in the world. Compassion is simply, well, everyone struggles, everyone's imperfect. We're all in this together, in other words.
As you mentioned in the book, it's always easier to sort of have compassion outward versus inward. Why was it so important for you to write this for women? I mean, it's clearly defined as we go through your book. And I think we all kind of go, yeah, we're sort of maybe overgivers and have been trained for that. But let's talk specifically about women who, you are reaching out to through this book.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously every human being needs compassion. All you need to be qualified is that you're an imperfect human being. And I think most of us meet that qualification. But I wrote it specifically women for a couple of reasons. Well, one, even though compassion is part of the female gender role, and actually research shows that women tend to display more compassion to others than men do, we actually have less self-compassion. And that's largely because we're socialized to feel less entitled to meet our own needs, right? We're valued for being carers or helpers, and we don't want to be selfish. So we're kind of told that we shouldn't turn compassion inward, only outward. But the even bigger reason, the reason this book is called Fierce Self-Compassion, is there's really two sides of compassion. There's the tender, the more nurturing, gentle energy. But compassion also means like doing brave things, protecting yourself. I mean, if you think again about the female gender role, one place where we're really fierce is when we're protecting our children. Or think of a mama bear, right? That kind of anger can be part of compassion in the service of protecting, motivating change in the service of alleviating suffering. If you're doing something that's harmful, if you're in a situation that's harmful, you want to change that. But unfortunately, women are socialized not to be fierce, right? We're told that, it's fine if we're tender and soft and gentle, but people don't like angry or fierce or powerful or even competent women for that matter. So that's why I wrote the book, particularly for women, to kind of talk about how this fierceness is also a part of compassion. And we also need to claim it as our birthright.
And you differentiate between self-esteem, because you're saying, self-esteem can be a fair weather friend because it can depend on social approval, looking attractive or succeeding rather than failing. Yes. And you're saying self-compassion is sort of this perfect alternative because it doesn't require feeling better than others and it isn't contingent on anyone appreciating us. Yeah, exactly.
So, self-esteem is there for us in the good times, but it often deserts us when we need it most, which is when we fail or make a mistake or feel inadequate. And so self-compassion is all about kind of an unconditional sense of worth. We don't get our worth from succeeding or, as you say, looking a certain way or impressing others. We get it simply from, it's part of being human. The idea is that all human beings, when the moment they're born are intrinsically worthy of kindness and care. And so we tap into that more unconditional source of compassion and make sure that we turn it inward as well as outward.
Throughout your book, you have some great exercises, sort of some ways we can self-soothe, sort of meditations almost, lots of really great exercises to get ourselves into the right mind frame here on many different levels. But as of right now, can you just throw out some questions that we might be able to ask ourselves to see how self-compassionate you are? You do have a whole list in the book, but just a couple of ones that might tip off people to go,
Yeah. If people want to take the scale I developed, they can go do that on my website. But just very simply, a very easy exercise is ask yourself, how do you treat your friends when they come to you when they're upset in some way? If they're feeling badly about themselves or they're facing a big life challenge. And then how do you treat yourself when you're feeling badly about yourself or facing a big life challenge? And is there a difference? And normally, most people would not say to their friends what they say to themselves. Or if they did, they'd have no friends, right? So that's a very easy context in which to see the difference. And you can also ask yourself, would it really help my friend if I said this to her? I mean, we think that, we're going to motivate ourselves by saying, you're such a fat, lazy slob, get off your ass and do something. Would you say that to your friend and would that actually work? No, of course it would backfire. You'd be more encouraging and supportive with your friend and it works better. And the research shows it's exactly the same with ourselves.
Let's talk about, and that it really goes to sort of what you say, when we deny compassion to ourselves, but extend it to others, we undermine that basic truth that we're all part of this larger independent whole, which I think is sort of maybe an overtone of the book, hey, we all need to sort of not compartmentalize ourselves and the society we're living in.
Yes.
I love, there's so many benefits to self-compassion. A few that you mentioned, they're less anxious. They are less likely to contemplate suicide or abuse drugs. They have more of a positive body image. What are some other benefits to self-compassion?
Oh my goodness. I mean, there's almost 4,000 studies at this point on self-compassion. I can't even keep up with the literature, but they're just really almost in any area of life. Because what self-compassion is, it's a way of coping with pain, whether it's painful emotions, even physical pain, relationship pain, any sort of pain. Self-compassion, right? The desire to alleviate your own suffering with kind of warmth and kindness. It helps you cope with that pain, which means all sorts of benefits. Not only does it reduce all sorts of negative things like, depression, suicidal ideation, stress, burnout. It helps with physical health because, for instance, when you're less anxious, you sleep better and you improve your physical health. The interesting thing is self-compassion, believe it or not, actually is a positive emotion, even though it's aimed at suffering. Because it feels good when you feel kind and loving and connected. So it's almost like you're generating a positive emotion, not to sugarcoat the negative, but just kind of to hold the negative. Sorry, you can edit that out. Let me turn off my thing. So it means that you can actually hold the negative in a way that allows you to cope with this kindness, with this sense of safety and support. So it generates positive emotions like happiness, optimism, life satisfaction, at the same time that it reduces the bad stuff. So I like to joke, but I'm not really joking, that this is a superpower. It's amazing. Yeah. And the research is just overwhelming at this point, the difference it can make to improve your life. And it's so easy, it just requires that you start treating yourself with the same concern and support you would show to a good friend. It's in your back pocket. We just haven't given ourselves permission to use it. That's what I'm trying to change.
Well, and it's interesting you mentioned, when we're not compassionate towards ourselves, we're both the attacker and the attacked, right? We fight, yes. You say we fight ourselves with criticism, hoping that it's going to get rid of the weakness by forcing us to change. And then you, of course, later argue and mention that, no, this is not a weakness, right? This is a superpower and a strength. How can we, let's impress more upon the audience of that, this trying to get the weakness out of you, like fight with yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so if life is a battle in many ways, who's going to make you stronger when you go into battle? If the voice inside your head is an enemy, cutting you down, shaming you, calling you names, or if you got your own back and it was like, I'm here for you. What do you need? How can I help? Yeah. Clearly, being an inner ally is going to make you stronger than being an inner enemy. And, it makes such sense. And yet, well, I have to say, I think there are some physiological reasons why we tend to self-attack as a way to try to stay safe. It's because of the threat defense system, right? So we're programmed when we feel threatened or freaked out, to put it mildly, that we attack the problem. And of course, when the problem is ourselves, because we've made some mistake or we feel inadequate in some way, the only thing our brain goes to is, okay, I got to attack, I got to fight. And we think that attacking and fighting is going to change. So what we're doing with self-compassion, it's not entirely natural because we're using the system that really evolved to care for others, for, our offspring or group members, which is the care system, but we're using it with ourselves. Right.
And, you talk about how there's some difficulties with self-compassion that can be rooted in how we were raised in certain parenting styles. Can you sort of gloss over some of those?
Yeah.
To maybe alert those out there that go, oh, yeah, I see where mine might have come from.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not just parents. It also can just be like middle school, but oftentimes we get the message that we aren't valuable. Maybe our parents criticized us, or you went to a school system where it was very harsh, a lot of gossip, a lot of kind of bullying going on. And so we often internalize self-criticism, again, kind of just as a way to feel safe. Well, first of all, if you criticize yourself before others do it, then you've already you kind of beat them to the punch. It doesn't feel as painful if you do it first. If you're already on the floor, you can't fall any farther. So that also feels like it protects us. And also, especially for children whose parents criticize them, there's a basic need for children to believe that their parents know what they're talking about, to have faith in them. So if parents give you this message, it's like, okay, well, it must be true then, right? And again, that's just a basic safety behavior. So you don't want to beat yourself up for beating yourself up. This is just part of you that wants to try to stay safe. It's just that it's not as effective in terms of staying safe as support, warmth, care, asking, what do I need? How can I help? That's actually a lot more effective than self-criticism.
And just throwing this random one in there too, but I love the take that because self-compassion happens physiologically, physical touch is a highly effective way, you say, to demonstrate care for ourselves. I love that.
Yeah, it's really effective. Again, and it is touchy-feely, and people who don't like touchy-feely stuff are going to roll their eyes, but you can just understand that you're activating your parasympathetic nervous system, increasing heart rate variability, and lowering cortisol, right? Because touch, that's what it's designed to do. The first couple of years of life, parents primarily convey care to their infants through touch. And so the body is exquisitely designed to use touch as a signal of care. So when you put your hands on your heart, or maybe cradle your face, or just give yourself a hug, or even to hold your own hand, your mind may not be able to go there. Maybe it's too full of the storyline of how awful you are, or whatever the storyline is. But touch cuts through the chase and just kind of, you feel that warmth, you feel that physical support of your own hands. And it can also help kind of ground and stabilize you. So for me, these days, I would have to say touch is the primary way I give myself compassion, even more so than kind language.
Yeah,
but they're both good. Yeah.
I mean, it makes me think, I think we've all been in a situation at some point in our lives, maybe when we were younger, where we're really upset, we're crying, or something's happening, or we're about to, and someone notices it and they just grab us and take us into their arms. And then we break down. We're finally able to just kind of let it go. And so I love that, because it's like grabbing ourselves in those moments.
It is. Yes. That physical contact with ourselves, and our body doesn't really know the difference. I mean, parts of our body knows, but mainly it just reacts to touch similarly, whether it's self-touch or touch from another. So it's a really good way to help yourself in the moment. And it's quick and it's easy. And if the things that's causing you pain is your boss is pissing you off, you can just quietly hold your own hand or put your, cross your arms, fold your arms. No one needs to know you're giving yourself a little self-hug. It can still be really useful.
I love that. Let's talk about gender. You say it's not biological sex that leads to the differences in self-compassion. It's gender role socialization. That's the real culprit. And so that is why this book is really written for women, because we've got sort of more of the issue here, because men are, you say, better at self-compassion.
Well, I would say it's not so much that men are better at self-compassion. It's just women are raised to be compassion experts, but they're actually more compassionate to others. On the other hand, there's a reason why 85% of the people that show up at my workshops are women. It's because I think women intuitively know the value of compassion. They're kind of compassion experts. Men, on the other hand, men are also really harmed by gender role socialization. So they're allowed to be fierce, but they aren't allowed to be tender.
Yeah.
So for men, a big barrier is the idea that self-compassion is weakness, that they're going to be too sensitive, they aren't allowed to be vulnerable. So it really harms men as well. The reason I wrote the book for women is it would have just been too convoluted to write from both perspectives, because we're socialized very, very differently still, even in today's day and age. Gender roles, the idea that men are agentic and powerful and fierce and women are soft and communal and nurturing, it's just as powerful as ever. So the socialization is different. Both are harmed. But one thing you have to understand is, let's use the P word, patriarchy was designed for men to take those fierce roles so that they could have the resources. And women were designed to be accepting and, kind of helping others because they were given less power and resources. So one of the benefits men get from the system is they feel more entitled to meet their own needs. But that shouldn't, it took away from the tragedy of male socialization that prevents men from opening their hearts, and many men, not all men, of course, but that frowns upon men being tender and sensitive. And this really actually hinders their ability to be emotionally intelligent. And again, I'm generalizing, many men are, it's not, but just that force, men have to fight to be emotionally intelligent. They aren't raised to be emotionally intelligent as much. So,
yeah, you do touch on the #MeToo movement. You have a really interesting story there. As well about that. I think it's important because clearly we are more the victims of sexual abuse or harassment and these types of things. And you have some tips about speaking up on that. What's important for you to relay in that section to us about, what that movement, sort of can spawn in us to think about? I think it brought a lot of us, right? I mean, because so many of us were like, oh yeah, we've, someone smacked my ass randomly, like and you tell guy friends, they're like, what, who? And you're just, I guess we're used to it.
Well, yeah, I mean, so this was the real inspiration for me to write this book, especially for a woman, is I had my own Me Too experience with a guy who turned out to be a predator. And, and every woman I talked to has a similar story, as we found out in Me Too, it's not at all unusual. And just thinking through, well, why is it the case that for years and years and years, that's just the way men are, and what is shifting? And I think what's shifting is we're really coming into our fierce mama bear energy, as we say, no more, it's not okay. But for some women, not all women, for some women, again, because we're raised not to get angry, not to speak up, to not rock the boat, it actually can stand in the way of us standing up for what's right and the way we need to be treated. And also, personally, I actually have more fierceness and tenderness. That's just kind of my personality, and everyone's different. And I had a real hard time accepting the fact that I can get angry pretty easily. And I always thought this is, special. I'm a mindfulness and compassion teacher, and I got an anger issue and get all the shame associated with that. But then I realized that fierceness is what's allowed me to do things like when that situation that unfolded, I was really the one that took charge and shut the guy down. And that same fierce energy that's linked to some of my anger is also linked to that same fierce energy that's allowed me to really, create a whole new field of psychology and, create a lot of stuff in the world. So it's something to be honored, to be respected. Yeah, of course we want to work with it. We don't want to harm anyone with it, ourselves or others. that the energy of fierceness or power of anger, this is a really good thing. That inner mama bear that we all have is something to be celebrated and be grateful for. And that was a big shift for me. And so I wanted to help a lot of women, because I know I'm not the only one who feels a bit of shame when she gets angry, to say, hey, actually, we should rethink this. This is a form of kindness when expressed in the right way.
When you differentiate between constructive and destructive anger.
Yes, very important.
Can you just give us a couple of examples right there for people that might be like,
Yeah, well, so the easiest difference is constructive anger alleviates suffering, right? So anger against injustice, anger that protects, for instance, because anger can make you brave. It can reduce the fear response. So if someone attacks your children, you're going to be angry, and that's going to lead to protecting them. And so that's constructive. It's destructive when either it's harmful to others. So instead of stopping the behavior, getting angry at the behavior, when you actually make it personal, call people names, vilify others, or when it starts to be corrosive to you, like if you have ruminative anger, instead of just getting angry and letting it pass, if you fixate on your anger and it kind of starts harming you emotionally, it's also destructive. So, but anger can be used for good, but it needs to be harnessed. And that's why I talk so much, almost ad nauseum, but about the balance between fierceness and tenderness, because we need both. And it's being open to the tender side of compassion that allows us not to go overboard with our fierceness, and it can be hostile or destructive.
And in terms of, speaking up and this whole, I don't want to be rude. I don't want to be impolite. This is where the difficulties come with drawing boundaries, right?
Yes.
And so I love that you were talking about another author who provided some sort of standbys in the book, The Assertiveness Guide for Women. But I like some of these because some of the responses were great. Things like, that's just not going to work for me. I really appreciate you asking me, but I can't do it. Or I'm going to say no for now. I'll let you know if something changes. So hard for people to say no. What I have discovered is in talking with, Terry Cole, psychologist who wrote Boundary Boss as well. I think if anything, and perhaps you were like this too, I have more rigid boundaries than not being able to draw them. So like that, my problem is not drawing them. It's maybe
people are different.
But on that note, let's talk about drawing boundaries. This is really important, right? You got to speak up, because the drawing boundaries is not just what you're willing to tolerate or not. It's what you want to do and don't do. People get roped into stuff. People pleasers are like the worst here, right? They're going to get barreled over. So I'll let you dive into it.
Well, this is why self-compassion is essential for drawing boundaries, because one of the main drivers of the inability to draw boundaries is we want people to like us, and we're afraid people won't like us if we draw a boundary. And by the way, there is some truth to this, because people like it when women just say yes to everything. And sometimes they don't like it so much when we say no, because that's like our place is to say yes and to help everyone. And people may get a little out of sorts if we assert ourselves and say no. And so that's why we need to move away from self-esteem that comes from people liking us and improving us, and say, what's more important is that I care about myself, and that I'm kind to myself, and then I say, well, what do I need? And I'm actually willing to give it to myself. And so when you have self-compassion, like if it has your back, it doesn't matter as much if people like it or not that you said no, but if you don't address this core issue of we're afraid people won't like us if we say no, it's going to be very hard to say no.
Well, and it makes me think, I probably brought it up somewhere before in the past, but it makes me think of back in the day, the person that unfortunately won with this because he realized there was a thing here was Ted Bundy, right? Because he would pretend to be injured and like go in front of women and be like, oh, hey, can you help me? And he was a good looking guy. And people were sort of like, oh yeah, no, like nowadays we'd be like, whatever, dude, right? Maybe. Yeah. But back then he really preyed on that. He preyed on that women are helpful. They're going to say yes. We don't say no. A guy is in need. You're helpful. You're compassionate. And that sort of, they're dead, right? Only one survived because a couple survived. So people will prey on that. You can really get into bad situations.
And that's an extreme version, but just narcissists in general. I talk about this in the chapter, the predator that I dealt with, he was a narcissist. If you read the literature on narcissism, they don't pick on like on the people who are like distrustful or really like the ones who are super strong or angry. They tend to go for the really nice, typically women, especially when it's a sexual narcissist. They go for women because they're understanding. They're willing to see things from multiple point of view. They want to see the good in people. They're really helpful. So that's why we have to be careful. Not that we don't want to trust anyone, but we have to make sure our fierceness is there as well to back us up and that we don't fall into the trap of being overly nice.
Yeah. And let's talk about trauma, because you mentioned that self-compassion really helps people cope with trauma, and particularly with prejudice and discrimination, which I thought was interesting. So let's get into trauma and how self-compassion really helps.
Yeah. Well, so, as I said before, self-compassion in many ways is a way to deal with pain, right? So pain is the type of suffering. And when we give ourselves kindness, when we remember we aren't alone with the common humanity, we're able to be with it without resisting it, which makes it worse. And so when people are traumatized, first of all, I have to say sometimes some types of trauma, things like dissociation or numbing out, is actually the only survival strategy you have. And so if you have to do that, you have to do that. But eventually the trauma gets stored in our body, right? We can develop PTSD, we can get flashbacks. We need to eventually try to heal our trauma when we're ready. Again, you don't want to push this on people, but when you're ready, you need to try to heal your trauma to kind of bring it to the light of day, because if it just stays repressed inside, it's still going to affect you negatively. And so what self-compassion does for trauma is it allows us, first of all, to be present with more pain, because again, the sense of safety it gives us is like, imagine if you can go see something really scary, if you have someone that you love with you holding your hand, it's going to give you emotional and moral support. So with ourselves, being able to face the pain with that warmth, with that kindness, kind of realizing it's okay, we're safe now, and we care about ourselves, and also the ability to only go as far as it's right for you. Ask myself, what do you need? Well, sometimes what you need is like not to face it for right now. You need to like shut down. So all those skills of warmth, support, care, kindness, and just really allowing your heart to kind of break for your own trauma. Just like you would with a friend who told you the story of their trauma, your heart would break. And when your heart breaks with yourself, it actually breaks open. It may hurt, may be scary, but it's actually a good thing when our hearts break open. And
you say it leads to post-traumatic growth, which involves learning and growing from these experiences, which is then you're getting the benefit of the shitty, horrible thing that happened.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And by the way, there's not always post-traumatic growth. Sometimes it's just shitty and horrible, and it's just that's it. But often, actually, probably more often than not, well, at the very least, it makes us stronger. But there are often lessons we learn, strengths we have, qualities of courage and strength and wisdom that we develop that we might not have developed otherwise if it weren't for the experience. So, Yeah, and
I love that. And I think also too, I mentioned it in my book as well. I think a lot of people do the woman who started Mothers Against Drunk Driving, right? Took a horrible traumatic experience, turned it into a movement that led to, helping humanity in lots of really great ways. So that's a very extreme example, but one that, I think is just, especially of our generation, is like forefront. And then I love the studies around resolving conflict, because you said that you found that young people who had more self-compassion were significantly more likely to report compromising in a way that took into account the needs of each party. So they didn't give up what was personally important, but they also didn't put their needs first. So, hey, if you're a mediator, you're in negotiation, you're going to want to get on the self-compassion train. You're going to be real good at it, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Because self-compassion is not selfishness, right? Because that's the common humanity piece. It's not like my needs are important and yours aren't. It's like, hey, we're all human beings. Everyone's needs are important. How can we value everyone's needs? So those who just kind of subordinate themselves or give themselves away, they aren't valuing themselves. But then again, like a narcissist or someone who's selfish, they aren't valuing the other person, right? So it's the self-compassion. What we found, is this idea that my needs are important, but other people's are important. How do we try to come to some solution that meets everyone's needs? And this is important, especially for women, because women are kind of afraid that it's going to be selfish, to self-compassion. But ironically, what we know from the research is, even though it's called self-compassion, there's actually less of a separate self with self-compassion. Self-criticism and shame, that's really when we're really feeling so separate from other people. With self-compassion, really all that means is, hey, I'm a human being. We all hurt. We're all imperfect. I have needs. Everyone has needs. So it's actually less self-focused than other states of mind, which is why it leads to better relationships, a more willingness to compromise, more personal responsibility, for instance, more willingness to say, I'm sorry if you've harmed someone. So it's, it's inward and outward, because you're reducing that artificial boundary between self and others, which, if we're talking about boundaries, you have boundaries in terms of saying no, but in terms of self-concept, we are part of a larger interdependent whole. That's what wisdom tells us. So being able to see yourself as part of the larger whole is part of the wisdom of self-compassion.
Well, and I love what you have to say about authenticity, because I just, in my experience, that reigns supreme in life, no matter what. We all feel more comfortable and safe around people that are authentic. But that's the component of mindfulness you're talking about, because you say it helps us to be authentic by clarifying our inner beliefs, values, and emotions. So talk a little bit more about how the practice of self-compassion and mindfulness in this arena helps us clarify our beliefs, helps us become more authentic. If that's one thing anyone can take from this conversation, I would say this is the most important one, because actually people that are authentic are more confident in themselves. They have no need to bullshit other people or be someone that they're not, right? It's just they're authentic, and they're often more successful.
Yeah. And I have to say personally that if I were to think of all the gifts self-compassion has given me, I think that's probably the biggest one. I've got my problems, but I'm authentic with them. I don't claim to be anyone other than who I am, which is why I'm able to spill so much of my dirty laundry in these books, because I don't want to come off as this self-help guru who has all the shit together. I'm not. I'm a total mess like everyone else, but I am a compassionate, authentic mess, right? A mess what compassion gives me. So the way it helps us be authentic is actually on many different fronts. First of all, being willing to pay attention to what's true for us, which is part of caring. If you had a friend that you didn't care about, you wouldn't even know what they valued or what was important to them. But if you care, you're like, oh, tell me, you listen to them, you listen to your friend, what do you need? Do you need help, or what's important to you? And so we start to listen to ourselves more when we start to value ourselves more. So first of all, the mindfulness, again, especially helps us know what we want, to kind of sort through what's true for me, what's just society telling me what's true. But the other way, again, it really helps is this sense of unconditional self-worth. I can't really stress that enough. When you have a sense that even if you make a huge mistake or you fail miserably, or you fall flat on your face, it doesn't mean you're going to love yourself less, or that you're going to feel you're any less worthy. Then that actually is what gives you the freedom just to be yourself. You don't need to impress anyone else, right? You don't even need to
talk about that radical self-acceptance of where you are, what you are right at this moment.
Exactly, right? Really. So, and by the way, some people, when they hear this, they think, well, does that mean I'm going to be complacent? Well, no, because if you care about yourself and you're doing something that's harmful to yourself or others, you're going to want to change it. And you're going to want to reach your goals, reach your highest potential. But as you're trying to reach your highest potential, it doesn't, you're good the whole way. You're good when you aren't there. You're good at 0.0, you're good at 0.5, and you're good at 0.10. It's all good. So the reason you try to change or improve isn't because you're inadequate, but just because, hey, you care about yourself. But you know what? If you fail, that's okay too. It's like this huge safety net that allows you to be your true self. Because again, win or lose, praise or blame, you still care about yourself regardless. It's just like if you had that, totally ideal, unconditionally loving, supportive, caring parent, that parents still want to help you go to good school and, get the help you need, eat well and exercise because they care, but their love isn't contingent on it. And when you know that really deep down, then anything's possible. And in many ways, what we're doing with self-compassion is we're giving ourselves that same kind of unconditionally a supportive, loving parenting that that we probably didn't get because people are human.
We touched on it briefly, but maybe now is a good time to maybe get into it a bit more, where, you had mentioned or we talked about how some people see self-compassion as either selfish or a weakness. But you're saying that self-compassion not only fosters the belief that growth is possible, it increases our ability to work for it, where people might be afraid that self-compassion would make them lose their edge. And you say the truth is exactly the opposite. So for the people out there that feel like that's too woo-woo, too weak, too softy, too tender, and that they may lose some edge there, why won't they? And let's get into that.
Yeah, well, and that's another reason I wrote this book about fierce self-compassion, because, there is an aspect of self-compassion, which is, as a person, I can unconditionally accept myself. But it doesn't mean I necessarily unconditionally accept my behavior. If I'm a top athlete, I know if my performance is good enough or not. I'm good enough, even if my performance isn't, but I still want my performance to be the best that it is. So it kind of separates your worth as a person and your performance or your behaviors or your achievement. So people who are self-compassionate, they want to succeed just like the next person. But ironically, here's the rub. When you fail to reach your goal, for instance, we developed a training program for athletes. We called it Fail Better. In other words, how do you deal with failure in a way that's going to help your game? And it's like that in almost any realm of life. When you fail and you shame yourself or you beat yourself up, it's going to inhibit your ability to learn from your failure.
Yeah.
But if you fail, it's like
the positive, you're not getting the feedback. You aren't getting victimhood. Yeah,
exactly. That's right. But if it's like you fail and it's like, okay, well, everyone fails. Doesn't mean I'm a bad person. It just meant I failed at this. Okay, what can I learn from this? And that's why it really engenders this growth mindset and grit and ability to just keep trying. So again, self-criticism kind of works as a motivator, but it makes you feel insecure. It makes you feel anxious. It can lead to procrastination, fear of failure. So self-compassion, knowing that whether you fail or succeed, you got your own back, but you're really going to try as much as you can to do your very best because you care. That's actually the best combination for success.
And you talk about empathy and that there's some issues with it. And you mentioned empathic pain. And I can relate to this in the fact that I had a friend who was very empathetic, and she was in a sort of spiritual psychology school. And because of the way they do their program, lots of people were sharing, their laundry, their life, their insecurities. And it was too much for her. It was affecting her personally outside of life playing. And she really had this awareness of, I think that I'm too empathic here, and maybe I need to pull out of this, because she was dealing with some health problems at the time, and thought, maybe I need to pull out because I can't subject myself to it because I'm too empathic.
Yeah. Well, empathic pain, look at teachers, healthcare providers, almost therapists, almost anyone in the helping professions is going to suffer from empathic pain. And of course, the people drawn to the helping professions are those who are more empathic. I'm not sure it's a matter of being too empathic, but perhaps not being self-compassionate enough. So first of all, what you need to do, and we also have a self-compassion training program for caregivers, for whether they're parents or healthcare professionals. So what you need to do is, first of all, you need to have compassion for your empathic pain, right? You need to acknowledge this is really hard right now. You need to help and support yourself. Say, what do I need right now? You need to validate your pain. You can't ignore it. You need to take the time for yourself if you can, or maybe put your hand on your heart and say, well, this is really, I'm here for myself. This is so hard. It's like kind of giving yourself that warmth a friend would. And then also sometimes drawing boundaries is an important part of being self-compassionate. Sometimes you can only take so much in. So for instance, my son's autistic, and I talk a lot about him in the book, and he doesn't mind. But, a 5-year-old who isn't potty trained and is screaming his head off at a zoo or something like that, talk about empathic pain, especially when it's your own child, because you're so close to your child. I would put like 95% of my awareness on myself. I'd make sure he was safe, but I would okay, Kristen, this is so hard. I would again, validate my pain. I'd take breaths. I would give myself warmth and kind of love. And then when I did that, my distress would start to lower. And then I would have more resources to turn to him. But here's the thing. So empathy goes both ways. So if you're with someone who's in pain, you're feeling their pain through your mirror neurons, and they're also feeling your presence. So if you're frustrated and burned out, they're also feeling that. So if you give yourself compassion, it's almost like the person you're helping can get that secondary compassion through their mirror neurons. So my son, he would actually start to calm down when I gave myself compassion. So, this idea that we're separate is really bogus, because even just the way the human brain is constructed, it's designed to feel other people's emotions that developed because of the parent-infant relationship, and it was really useful evolutionarily. So what you bring out into the world, every single person you interact with is going to, through their mirror neurons, pick up on your internal mind state. Which kind of, when people say self-compassion is selfish, it's like, oh yeah?
Yeah, really? I have no problem with that word. I'm like, yeah, please be selfish. It's in all the
it's not selfish in the sense that it excludes other people.
That's right.
We want to be self-compassionate. We want to, which includes other people. Kind of, at least the way I've defined it by definition, and that's partly why I don't use the term self-love. I mean, self-love is great, but it doesn't necessarily include other people. We need to frame our self-love in the context of something larger than ourselves. You can call it humanity. You could call it the universe. If you're a spiritual person, you could even call it God if you wanted to. I mean, the idea is that as part of this larger whole, we deserve compassion, but it's not like we deserve it more than other people. It's just as much as other people.
Now, you were in sort of closing up here, and in the last minutes we have here left, you were very vulnerable and open about a lot of things in this book, which is great. Like you said, you're like, hey, I'm not standing on some moral high ground, but and you kind of make fun of yourself a little bit, because you're like, you studied moral development, and then you mentioned in the book that at one point you did have an affair, and you were like, oh God, that goes against every moral sort of fabric of your being. So for the people, for people out there that feel like they've done something wrong like that, or against their morals, or not even if it's cheating, it could be something else, stealing, whatever it is, that they're just like, ugh, yucks. I knew better. This is not my belief system. I went against it. Yeah. What can you offer them right now? People that are out there beating themselves up about sort of like a moral infringement,
Yeah. Well, so this is,
how did you do it?
Well, I mean, that luckily it happened at the same time I was learning self-compassion. It just made all the difference. So it's not letting yourself off the hook, quite the opposite. It gives you the safety to really own up when you've hurt someone, because it hurts. And so you need the strength of self-compassion. You need the strength of an open heart to say, okay, this happened, right? Now, of course, imperfection is the shared human experience, right? Everyone's imperfect. People mess up in their own unique way. It's not to belittle what you've done, but it's not like you're the only person who's ever gone against their moral values or done something to harm others, right? This is part of the human experience. And so this allows you to open to it and really be with it. It's like you can be with the pain as long as enough love is there. Love gives us the strength to hold the pain without being overwhelmed by it. So the more love is there, the more pain we're able to open to. And you really need to be able to open to the pain of, especially when it's pain of something you regret or you've harmed someone. So instead of beating yourself up, first of all, it's not saying it was okay. And I can tell you, I am like probably the most honest person you'll ever want to meet, partly because of that experience. It's like, okay, I'm never doing that one again, right?
You learned from that. Yeah.
Yeah. But and so being able to open to what you've done, to acknowledge what you've done, without saying that you're a bad person. Okay, I made a mistake. I regret it. I'm so sorry. And then what can I do to make sure it doesn't happen again? But beating myself, shaming myself. Well, by the way, we can't really control whether or not shame arises. Shame is like a natural biological emotion. So shame arises and you just hold the pain of the shame.
Yeah.
It still arises. Even when people talk about it, I always feel that little twinge of shame when it's like, okay, Yeah.
Right. You're just not simmering in it for the rest of the day.
Exactly. Yeah. But that's part of the human experience, and that's okay to be an imperfect human being who fails to make mistakes. Again, it's like the idea, the goal of practice is just to be a compassionate mess. You'll still be a mess. I'm still a mess. I'll be a mess till the day I die. But can you be compassionate toward that mess? And the more you are, not only the more it will help yourself, but also other people, the more resources you'll have to help other people.
I love it so much. Tell us, how can we benefit more from, obviously you've got the other book, Self-Compassion, the proven power of being kind to yourself.
Yeah.
What about the Mindful Self-Compassion workbook and the Mindful Self-Compassion program? Are those two together that are for professionals? I guess I was a little confused on the
rollout. Yeah. So I've got, the Mindful Self-Compassion program is for everyone, and the workbook is for anyone. And if you want to get some self-compassion training, if you go to the Center for Mindful Self-Compassion, that's what we do. We do online training. You can take a 10-week course in it. You can take a short course. But also I've got lots of practices on my website, free practices. You downloaded meditations or guided practices at selfcompassion.org. If you are a health professional,
is that self-compassion.org or self-compassion?
It doesn't matter. I got in so early. Any way you spell it, Google finds me. I'm the first thing that comes up. If you can misspell it, it finds me. So any way you want to spell it, I'll come up. But we also have a more professional manual for those who want to integrate self-compassion. Maybe you're a therapist into your work. And then we have that as well. It's not, it's not as many people buy that, but yeah, self-compassion is for everyone. So yeah, the easiest place to start, if you go to my website, you can take the test, see if you score high or low in self-compassion and whether you want to improve it. You can there's some downloaded, you can download some exercises, or take training at the Center for Mindful Self-Compassion. It's really easy these days. It wasn't like this 10 years ago, but now there's a lot of training available, which is great. Makes me very happy.
And we'll put, totally. And we'll put all the links in the show notes, but that's centerformsc.org, the center for it, right, that you talked about, and then also selfcompassion.org.
Yes.
Thank you so much for all of your work. This is such an important message. And I feel, especially in the times we've been through in the past few years, this is ultra important. I think we've all been woken up, especially women, to the fact that we need to get on this train. So Thank you so much for this contribution, a lovely book. And anything else you'd like to leave on this topic with our audience?
Oh, well, maybe just to say, luckily it's self-compassion isn't rocket science. It's not actually very difficult to do because we already know how to do it for others. It's really just more about giving ourselves permission to turn this skill inward. It's not as hard as you might think it is. It'll feel a little awkward at first. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
But the skill.
But any type of self-improvement game is a little awkward.
A little awkward. But I've been really impressed by how learnable it is. Even people who really struggle, eventually they get there. So that's the good news. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. And to everyone else, we will see you next time.
Hey, listeners. Over the years, a ton of companies have approached me to collaborate, but I will only promote companies whose products I believe in and that I actually use and consume on a regular basis. So let me tell you about some of my favorite companies that I can offer you discounts for. Rep Provisions, an amazing company doing incredible things for our planet, topsoil, and animals with regenerative agriculture, and it's my #1 source for quality pasture-raised meat and chicken. Visit repprovisions.com and use code L15 for 15% off. I'm also obsessed with a company called Carnivore Crisps. They make a lean, all-natural, and delicious alternative to conventional snacking, made with just real meat and real salt. Totally addictive, and my favorite ones are the beef brisket and the ribeye. Visit carnivorecrisps.com and use code PALEO10 for 10% off. I also love and regularly use Paleo Valley products. They make amazing supplements and delicious paleo products. I use the superfood greens powder, grass-fed beef sticks, the organ complex, and their bone broth bars. I love the lemon and apple. I also use their essential C complex and more. Visit paleovalley.com/promos/Elle Russ for 15% off. I also love Primal Kitchen. They make delicious paleo-approved, gluten-free, grain-free, soy-free, and no refined sugar products, and I use them daily, from their collagen powders and sauces and marinades to their avocado and olive oil. So good, so healthy. Visit primalkitchen.com and use code L10 for 10% off. I also love paleo powder and use it almost on everything I cook. They make incredible seasoning blends, and they also have these incredible grain-free coatings that feel just like crispy breadings that you would have had prior to knowing that there's another way. So visit paleopowder.com and use code L15 for 15% off.